The showroom glowed with soft golden light, rows of glass bottles lined like jewels on white pedestals. Cameras flashed influencers, whispered excitedly, and the air carried the faint fragrance of lavender and rose. It should have been a celebration of innovation and elegance. But beneath the shimmering surface, a storm was quietly brewing. Clara Mitchell stood at the edge of the room, her posture graceful, her silver hair swept back, her tailored dress understated yet dignified. At 60, she was still striking the kind of woman whose presence commanded attention without effort. Decades ago, she had transformed her passion for natural remedies into a flourishing skincare brand, becoming a symbol of timeless beauty. Every formula, every success had been born from her own hands, her own sacrifices. And yet tonight, as she watched the stage, her legacy was being paraded by another. Andrew Carter, her son-in-law, stepped into the spotlight with the ease of a man who believed the world belonged to him. At 35, he was polished, handsome, his smile practiced for the cameras. Behind him, screens displayed slogans, "The future of beauty, nature perfected." The crowd applauded as he lifted a sleek bottle and declared, "This formula will redefine skincare as we know it." Pure, powerful, revolutionary. Clara's eyes narrowed. She recognized that formula, not because she had read it in a press release, but because she had written it herself years ago in the privacy of her own notebooks. The ingredients, the proportions, the very philosophy, it was hers. Stolen, repackaged, and now celebrated as his invention. The betrayal cut deeper than business. Andrew had once sat at her table, called her mom, pretended respect. She had welcomed him into her family, trusted him with her daughter Sophia, even allowed him glimpses into the heart of her work. And now, under the glow of chandeliers, in the eyes of the world, he stood there building his empire on the bones of her secrets. Clara did not flinch. She did not storm the stage or cry foul. She stood in silence, her expression unreadable. For behind her calm exterior was a resolve sharper than any blade. She had anticipated this moment. She had prepared for it. He thought stealing beauty would buy him an empire, the narration whispered like a shadow across the glimmering room. But what he didn't know was that secrets buried in truth cannot be stolen. The applause thundered on. Cameras flashed brighter. Andrew basked in his triumph, and Clara, standing quietly in the corner, began counting down the moments to his fall. Follow for more powerful family revenge stories. Clara Mitchell had not always been the woman people admired, the elegant entrepreneur who spoke at conferences, the face behind a beloved line of natural cosmetics. Decades earlier, she had been just another young mother trying to make ends meet. Her late husband, a kind but modest man, had worked in construction while Clara stayed at home raising their only daughter, Sophia. What little money came into the house was spent carefully, often stretched until it nearly broke. But Clara carried something priceless, a secret passed down through generations of women in her family recipes for natural beauty elixirs crafted from herbs, oils, and minerals. Her grandmother had whispered them to her in childhood, and Clara had scribbled the formulas into a leather-bound notebook. At first, she made creams and tonics only for friends and neighbors. The demand grew. One neighbor told another, and soon women across town were asking for Clara's balm, the lotion that softened wrinkles, healed blemishes, and brought back a youthful glow without chemicals. By the time she turned 40, Clara realized her secret could be more than a kitchen-side hobby. With courage and long nights of trial, she opened her first boutique, Mitchell's Naturals. It was modest at the start, just a storefront with shelves she stocked herself. But the quality spoke louder than advertising. Every jar was handmade, every product rooted in authenticity. Slowly, the business expanded, first regionally, then nationally, until Clara's name was synonymous with natural beauty. Sophia, her daughter, grew up watching her mother's transformation from housewife to respected entrepreneur. She adored Clara not only as a mother, but as a model of resilience and grace. When Sophia married Andrew Carter, Clara welcomed him warmly. She had been wary of men who chased wealth and status, but Andrew seemed different. He was polite, ambitious, but charming, a young man who spoke of family first. At 32, Sophia was radiant, and Andrew appeared devoted. Clara even offered him a position within her company, believing it important to keep the family legacy bound together. At meetings, Andrew called her mom in front of staff, his voice filled with affection. He praised her vision, her leadership, her brilliance. Clara flattered and softened, allowed him greater responsibility, first in sales, then in supply management, eventually giving him limited access to product development discussions. For a time, it seemed perfect. Dinners at the Mitchell household were warm. Sophia would laugh with her mother, Andrew would pour the wine, and the three of them would speak of the company's future. Clara often thought how lucky she was that she had not only built a business, but also preserved the closeness of family. But small things began to disturb her. One evening, while returning late to her office, Clara noticed Andrew at her desk. He jumped when she entered quickly, snapping shut her grandmother's leather notebook. His excuse was smooth. "I was just tidying up, Mom," but his eyes flickered with something sharp, something hungry. Another time, she saw him lingering in the storage room, scribbling notes as he examined ingredient labels. The final crack came when Clara overheard him on the phone. He was speaking in hushed tones, pacing near the back porch. "Yes, I have the proportions." "No, she doesn't suspect. Give me time, and I'll have the entire formula." Clara froze, her heart sinking. It was betrayal, but not the kind she had ever imagined. Her daughter's husband, the man she had treated like a son, was plotting to take what generations of women before her had safeguarded. He was not simply ambitious. He was dangerous. His politeness, his smiles, his praises, nothing more than masks. That night, Clara sat awake in her study, the leather notebook resting on her lap. She traced its cover with her fingers, remembering her grandmother's words. "This knowledge is sacred, Clara. Protect it, for it will protect you." She realized the wound Andrew had opened was not just professional. It was deeply personal. He had violated her trust, her love, her family. Still, Clara said nothing, not yet. She kept her composure, continuing to treat Andrew with kindness, her eyes sharp, but her mouth closed. He thought her unaware. He thought her too old, too trusting, too fragile to recognize his deceit. But in the silence of her heart, a fire began to burn. The family dinners continued, though the laughter no longer warmed Clara. She watched Andrew closely, every gesture, every word. He still called her Mom, but now the words sounded hollow, poisoned. She smiled in return, hiding the storm behind her eyes. For Clara Mitchell, the wound was open, the betrayal undeniable. Yet she knew one thing with certainty. Beauty was not in the face, nor in the formula. True beauty was in patience, and she would wait quietly until the moment came to show Andrew Carter what it meant to betray the wrong woman. Andrew's mask began to slip the moment he thought he had secured his future. He became bolder, moving with a confidence that only someone convinced of his own cleverness could carry. While still smiling at Clara across the dinner table, he was quietly building an empire in the shadows. Through contacts Clara had never heard of, Andrew registered a new company under his own name. He rented an office downtown, sleek and modern, and hired a handful of ambitious young professionals who were eager to follow his vision. The name he chose for his brand was Sharp Trendy, designed to appeal to a younger market. On paper, it appeared to be his genius. But Clara knew the truth. It was her grandmother's formula, her decades of refinement, her legacy that fueled his dream. He siphoned off ingredients from Clara's suppliers, ordering in the same quantities, sometimes even from the same batches. He combed through the company's files under the pretense of auditing expenses. He made careful notes of proportions, substitutions, and packaging. And when his brand launched its first teaser campaign, Clara saw the words that cut like a knife, "Nature's Secret Rediscovered." Sophia, blinded by love, believed her husband was simply brilliant. "Isn't it incredible, Mom?" she said one evening, glowing with pride. "Andrew is going to change the beauty industry. People say he has the touch of genius." She looked at Clara with eyes that begged for approval. unaware that the so-called genius was nothing more than theft. Clara's heart ached, but she remained silent. To shatter Sophia's illusions too soon would wound her deeply, and Clara could not bear to see her daughter crushed. Instead, she resolved to act carefully, deliberately. Not with shouts of accusation, but with precision. Her preparations began quietly. She started by collecting evidence, little pieces of truth that together would form an unbreakable wall. Late at night, when the house was still, Clara sifted through Andrew's discarded notes and found sketches of bottles nearly identical to hers. She checked supplier invoices and noticed duplicate orders quantities that mirrored her own production schedules. She accessed shared company drives and downloaded emails where Andrew had carelessly forwarded confidential information to his private account. Every scrap was saved labeled and locked away in a secure folder. Next, Clara turned to the law. She contacted Evelyn Harper, her long-trusted attorney, a woman as sharp as steel and loyal as family. Evelyn reviewed Clara's original research journals, her dated notebooks, her early prototypes. "You have more than enough to prove authorship," Evelyn assured her. "What Andrew has done isn't ambition, it's theft. We'll register additional protections immediately. When the time comes, he'll have no ground to stand on." But Clara was not content with legal safety alone. She understood that truth alone was not enough. It needed to be seen, felt, believed. And so she began crafting her own counterattack, not in the courtroom, but in the marketplace. In secret meetings with her marketing team, Clara sketched the framework of a new campaign, Back to Nature. It would be more than a slogan. It would be a movement. While Andrew's brand screamed of glamour and profit, Clara's message would whisper authenticity. It would remind women why they had trusted her products for decades, because they were real, honest, rooted in generations of care. She oversaw every detail. Commercials filmed not in glossy studios, but in wildflower fields and small apothecaries. Packaging that celebrated simplicity, with inscriptions about heritage and truth. A tagline that carried weight: real beauty, real roots. Her staff, though unaware of the full betrayal, sensed Clara's renewed fire. "It feels like you're going to war," one assistant remarked. Clara only smiled faintly. "Not war," she corrected. "Correction." At home, she maintained her mask. She still listened to Andrew's speeches at the dinner table, still endured his compliments, laced with condescension. He believed she was naive, too blinded by age to notice his betrayal. That illusion was her greatest weapon. The more he underestimated her, the more freely he moved, and the more evidence she gathered. One evening, as Clara closed her notebook of collected proof, she paused to write a single line at the bottom of the page. It was not for lawyers or judges, not for Sophia or Andrew, but for herself. A reminder of the path she had chosen. Revenge is not loud, it's silent preparation, and so she prepared, patiently, quietly, until the day would come when Andrew Carter's empire of stolen beauty would crumble in the face of truth. The grand ballroom glittered with chandeliers, polished marble floors, reflecting the flash of cameras. Rows of journalists, influencers, and industry leaders filled the seats, murmuring in anticipation. At the center of it all was Andrew Carter, striding onto the stage as though the world belonged to him. His tailored suit gleamed under the lights, his smile rehearsed to perfection. Behind him, towering LED screens displayed the sleek logo of his new company, Carter Essentials, accompanied by the slogan, "The future of beauty, nature perfected." Models glided across the stage in flowing gowns, their skin glowing under the spotlight, holding bottles of Andrew's revolutionary product. The crowd erupted in applause. Reporters scrambled to take notes. Bloggers typed furiously. Andrew Carter, the rising star of natural beauty. Andrew raised his hand for silence, basking in the adoration. His voice rang out smooth and commanding. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight, we witness a turning point in the beauty industry. For decades, people have sought miracles in science, in chemicals, in artificial solutions. But I have looked deeper. I have brought back the purity of nature. This formula, my formula, will redefine skincare as we know it. No longer will beauty be bound by age or time. Tonight, we embrace the true secret of eternal youth. Applause thundered the audience, dazzled by his confidence. Andrew's eyes glittered with triumph. He glanced toward Sophia, seated proudly in the front row, her face glowing with admiration for her husband. But just beyond the lights, standing quietly among the shadows, was Clara Mitchell. She had waited for this moment with patience carved from pain. She had let Andrew build his empire of lies, brick by stolen brick. Now, with the world watching, she was ready to pull it down. As Andrew raised the signature bottle high in the air, the LED screens behind him suddenly flickered. The company logo dissolved, replaced by a new campaign, sweeping images of fields of lavender, rose gardens, hands mixing oils in glass jars. Across the screen appeared bold words, "Back to nature, the true legacy of beauty." The room gasped. The music cut off. Andrew froze, his confident smile faltering. The screens rolled forward photographs of Clara, in her early years, working in her small boutique, her hands carefully mixing the very formula Andrew had claimed as his own. Scans of her grandmother's leather-bound notebook pages, dated decades earlier, appeared for all to see. Official documents flashed next, patents, copyrights, legal registrations bearing Clara's name. A narration filled the room, Clara's voice calm and steady. "For generations, my family has preserved the secrets of natural beauty. These formulas were born from love, from sacrifice, and from truth. They are not inventions to be stolen. They are legacies to be honored." The silence was deafening. All eyes turned from the screens to Andrew, who stood rigid, his hands still clutching the bottle that now looked like stolen evidence rather than a miracle. A reporter shouted, "Mr. Carter, did you steal these formulas from your mother-in-law?" Cameras clicked furiously. Microphones surged forward. Andrew's face shifted, first a twitch of disbelief, then panic, then a flush of anger. This is slander," he stammered. "These are lies. I developed this formula myself." But the evidence continued to play. Time-stamped emails, invoices, even receipts from suppliers tied directly to Andrew's private accounts, matching Clara's original ingredients. Proof upon proof, impossible to deny. Whispers spread through the crowd, sharp and merciless. He stole everything. So it wasn't his after all. Fraud. Sophia's face drained of color. She stared at her husband, her lips trembling, unable to reconcile the man she loved with the thief exposed before her. Andrew's composure cracked completely. His confident smile twisted into fury. "This is a setup," he shouted, slamming the bottle down on the podium. "She's trying to destroy me because she's jealous. She's old, irrelevant, desperate to hold on to power." But then Clara stepped into the light. She walked slowly, elegantly, her presence commanding the room. She did not raise her voice, did not match Andrew's anger. Instead, she spoke with the calm authority of truth. "Beauty cannot be stolen," she said softly, yet her words carried to every corner of the ballroom. "It can only be revealed." The audience erupted, not in applause for Andrew, but in admiration for Clara. Journalists surged toward her, cameras flashing. Reporters hurled questions at Andrew, their tone no longer adoring, but accusatory. Andrew stood frozen, his triumph crumbled into ash, his empire revealed as nothing more than theft. And Clara, standing tall before the world, knew the tide had turned. Her patience had delivered justice, not with rage, but with undeniable truth. The days following Clara's quiet but devastating revelation became the beginning of Andrew Carter's collapse. At first, he tried to dismiss the exposé as a misunderstanding. He told the press that Clara had exaggerated, that the documents shown were outdated, irrelevant, or even forged. For a brief moment, a handful of supporters clung to his words, unwilling to believe that the man they had praised as a visionary was nothing more than a fraud. But truth, once revealed, has a way of spreading like wildfire. Within a week, the numbers told the story that no spin could erase. Sales of Carter Essentials plummeted. Shelves in high-end boutiques that once displayed his sleek bottles were emptied not by eager customers, but by retailers pulling stock to avoid scandal. Online reviews flooded in one-star ratings, accompanied by scathing comments. Fraud. Stolen formula. Don't trust this brand. Influencers, who had once been paid handsomely to promote his products, quickly deleted their posts, issuing apologies to their followers. Corporate partners began severing ties. Contracts worth millions evaporated overnight as investors fled unwilling to attach their names to a man accused of betraying not just his industry, but his own family. One particularly brutal headline in the New York Business Journal read "Con man or businessman, son-in-law, accused of stealing 100 bombers. Family beauty secret." The question mark in the headline was rhetorical. The article left little doubt. Sophia, who had stood proudly at his side during the launch, now struggled with her conscience. She replayed the night over and over, the smug look on Andrew's face as he declared the formula his the moment her mother's campaign had stolen the spotlight. The damning evidence splashed across the screens. She wanted to believe him, to trust the man she had promised to love. But every new headline, every piece of proof chipped away at her certainty. At home, their dinners grew tense. Andrew, once charming and talkative, now snapped at small questions. When Sophia asked gently, "Is it true? Did you take her formula?" he slammed his glass on the table, his voice sharp. "Why do you sound like them? You're supposed to be on my side." But Sophia couldn't ignore what she saw, the arrogance in his face, the coldness in his tone, the cracks in the facade. The man she thought was a genius now looked like a stranger wearing ambition like a mask. The humiliation came next, not in the boardroom, but in the everyday moments that strip away dignity. At a high-end restaurant, Andrew handed over his black credit card with his usual flourish, only to have the waiter return embarrassed. "I'm sorry, sir. It's been declined." The whisper carried across the room, patrons glancing curiously at the man who only weeks before had been hailed as a rising star. Andrew demanded they run it again, his voice tight, but the result was the same. He left red-faced Sophia trailing behind in silence. At his office, employees began resigning in waves. First the marketing director, then the operations manager, until the once bustling workplace echoed with emptiness. The few who remained avoided his eyes, whispering in corridors, their loyalty shattered. One morning, he arrived to find the lobby nearly deserted. The receptionist gone without notice, her desk cleared. On her chair, someone had left a tabloid with the headline circled in red, "Son-in-law steals mother-in-law's legacy." On social media, the destruction was merciless. Hashtags like "Stolen Beauty" and "Fraud Carter" trended for days. Memes mocked his fall from grace, pairing images of his smiling face at the launch with captions like, "When mom's recipe ruins your empire." Online petitions called for boycotts, and videos exposing his lies amassed millions of views. The final blow came when Clara's own campaign surged ahead. Back to Nature became not just a product line, but a movement. Customers embraced her authenticity, praising her resilience. Headlines shifted. From betrayal to brilliance, Clara Mitchell's triumph. Every success of hers became another nail in Andrew's coffin. At night, Andrew sat alone in the dim light of his study, surrounded by unpaid bills and unanswered calls. His phone buzzed constantly, not with congratulations or opportunities, but with creditors and reporters demanding statements. He ignored them all, staring instead at the remnants of his empire, bottles of stolen beauty gathering dust. For Clara, the unraveling was not cause for gloating. She moved forward with grace, continuing her work, expanding her foundation, speaking softly when asked about Andrew. "It is sad," she told one reporter, "but theft cannot stand. Beauty like truth cannot be built on lies." For Andrew, however, each day brought a new humiliation. He had gambled everything on deception and lost. Not just his business, not just his reputation, but the respect of the very family he had once charmed. And in losing those things, he discovered the cruelest truth of all empires, built on stolen secrets, always collapse, and when they do, they bury their makers beneath the rubble. Andrew was a man cornered and cornered, Men often lash out. The empire he had stolen was in ruins, the public branding him a fraud, but rather than retreat, he doubled down. Within weeks of his downfall, his lawyers filed suit against Clara Mitchell, accusing her of slander, libel, and intentional interference in his business. Press releases followed. Andrew painted himself as the victim of an overbearing matriarch who could not accept that the younger generation might outshine her. He insisted Clara's so-called evidence had been doctored, that the formulas she claimed as family heritage were nothing more than common blends anyone could produce. Beauty, he declared in one interview, doesn't belong to one woman's notebook. It belongs to the future. The media, hungry for conflict, ran with the narrative. Headlines blared fraud or frame-up family feud deepens. Talk shows debated whether Clara was a visionary, betrayed by her son-in-law, or an aging mogul desperate to keep the spotlight. In the Parker household, the strain grew unbearable. Sophia, caught between her mother and her husband, found herself drowning in conflicting loyalties. She still loved Andrew. How could she not? Not after years of marriage. Yet every time she looked at Clara, she saw the pain in her mother's eyes, the dignity with which she bore each accusation. One evening, Sophia confronted Andrew. "Did you steal from her?" "Please, Andrew, just tell me the truth." He slammed his fist against the counter. "I built everything myself." "Your mother is jealous, Sophia. She can't stand that I had the courage to step out of her shadow. She's destroying us because she can't let go." Sophia flinched at his anger, but the seed of doubt remained. For every word he spoke, Clara had quiet evidence, documents, notebooks, patents that whispered otherwise. Clara herself wrestled with an even deeper conflict. She could crush Andrew in court. Evelyn Harper, her lawyer, assured her the case was solid. Yet at night, as she sat alone with her journal, she wondered if victory was worth the cost. What would become of Sophia? Would a daughter ever forgive a mother for destroying her husband, no matter how justified? Her heart ached at the thought. She whispered into the silence, "I never wanted war within my own family." The darkest moment came one stormy night when Andrew appeared unannounced at Clara's home. He was disheveled, his eyes wild with desperation. He strode into her study without invitation, the rain dripping from his coat onto her polished floor. "You've ruined me," he hissed, his voice low but venomous. "Do you know what it's like to lose everything, to be laughed at by the very people who once praised you?" Clara looked up from her desk, her face calm, though her heart raced. "You ruined yourself, Andrew. You built on lies. Lies never last." His laugh was bitter. He stepped closer, his words sharp as knives. "You're old, Clara. Your time is over. Beauty belongs to the young. No one cares about your faded secrets anymore." For a moment, his words stung. She was 60, her hair silver, her skin no longer smooth. She had felt the weight of age more keenly than ever during this ordeal. But then, like a candle rekindled, her mother's voice rose in her memory. "True beauty is not in the face, but in the truth you leave behind." She met Andrew's glare without flinching. "You mistake beauty for vanity. What you stole was never just a formula. It was legacy. And legacy cannot be stolen. It outlives thieves." Andrew's jaw tightened. For a moment, he looked as if he might lash out physically. But then he turned on his heel, slamming the door behind him. The echo of his departure rattled through the house like thunder. Clara sat in the silence that followed, her hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of her decision. She could end this war in the courts. Yes, she had the evidence, the truth, the patience. But the greater question lingered, like smoke. Would ending Andrew also mean losing Sophia forever? In that dark night, Clara realized the true cost of betrayal was not money or reputation. It was family. And yet she also knew that shielding Andrew would mean sacrificing the truth. And that was something she could never do. She closed her eyes, whispering to her grandmother's memory once more. "The truth will endure, and so will I." The courtroom was hushed, every seat filled with journalists, industry leaders, and curious onlookers who had followed the scandal from its explosive beginning. The world had seen Andrew Carter rise as a so-called pioneer in natural cosmetics. And now, they gathered to watch the outcome of his downfall. Clara sat at the plaintiff's table, her posture calm, her silver hair pinned neatly, a pearl brooch at her collar. She radiated quiet strength, her hands resting on the stack of leather-bound journals that had been the cornerstone of her life's work. Across from her sat Andrew, gaunt and restless, his once confident smile replaced by clenched jaws and darting eyes. Sophia was not by his side. She sat behind her mother, pale, silent, her wedding ring absent from her hand. The judge, an older man with a stern presence, cleared his throat as he lifted the ruling. After reviewing the evidence, he began, his voice echoing through the chamber. This court finds that the intellectual property rights to the formulas in question rest solely with Mrs. Clara Mitchell. The journal's patents, dated laboratory notes, and corroborating witness testimony provide irrefutable proof of authorship spanning decades. Mr. Andrew Carter's claims of independent development are unsupported and contradicted by the evidence presented. Andrew shifted his face, flushing with anger. The judge's gaze sharpened. Furthermore, the court recognizes that Mr. Carter used this misappropriated information for personal financial gain, deceiving business partners and consumers alike. The defendant is therefore liable for damages, legal fees, and the dissolution of Carter Essentials. The gavel struck once. This court rules in favor of the plaintiff. Gasps rippled through the courtroom, followed by a swell of applause from Clara's supporters. Reporters scribbled furiously their headlines, already writing themselves, "Justice for Clara Mitchell, the real face of natural beauty." Triumphs. Andrew slumped in his chair, his empire gone, his name stained beyond repair. Clara exhaled slowly, her composure unbroken, though her eyes shimmered with relief. She had not sought revenge in court, only truth. And now truth had spoken louder than all of Andrew's lies. Outside, cameras flashed as Clara stepped onto the courthouse steps. Microphones pushed toward her questions, flying Mrs. Mitchell. "How do you feel about the verdict? What's next for your company?" She raised her chin, her voice steady. "This victory is not mine alone. It belongs to every woman who has been told her work, her ideas, her sacrifices can be taken from her. Beauty is not in theft or greed, it is in honesty and endurance. I will continue to honor that truth, not by clinging to bitterness, but by building something greater." Sophia wept as she embraced her mother, whispering, "I'm so sorry, Mom. I should have seen him for what he was." Clara held her close, her voice tender. "You were blinded by love. That is no sin. But now you are free." Within months, the fallout was complete. Carter Essentials declared bankruptcy. Its offices shuttered, its shelves cleared by creditors. Andrew's name vanished from glossy magazines, replaced by scathing editorials about greed and betrayal. Former allies refused his calls. Invitations stopped arriving. He was a pariah in the very circles where he once strutted with arrogance. Sophia filed for divorce, her decision painful but resolute. "I cannot build a life with a man who builds on lies," she said quietly. Returning to her mother's side, she found not judgment but compassion. Together, they rebuilt not only their bond, but also the family's sense of trust. Clara, meanwhile, looked beyond her own triumph. She expanded Mitchell's Naturals, but she did not keep the profits for herself. Instead, she poured resources into a new vision, the Buried Beauty Foundation. Its mission to support women entrepreneurs in clean cosmetics, to provide grants and mentorship for those who dreamed of building businesses rooted in honesty and sustainability. At the foundation's launch, Clara stood before a crowd of young women, her voice carrying the same calm authority that had carried her through the courtroom. "What was stolen from me cannot be returned. But what I can do is ensure no woman walks this path alone. The beauty industry has been too often driven by greed and deceit. Let us build something different, an industry where truth and care are more powerful than ambition." The audience rose to their feet in applause. For many, Clara was no longer just an entrepreneur. She was a matriarch of integrity, a guardian of legacy. Years later, scholarships from the foundation funded the rise of dozens of female-led businesses. Small startups flourished into respected brands, each carrying the ethos Clara had fought to preserve. And every time she was asked why she chose generosity over vengeance, her answer was the same: because the greatest revenge is not in another's ruin, but in the legacy you leave behind. As for Andrew Carter, his name became a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms and classrooms alike. He had stolen beauty to build his empire, but in the end, it was truth that buried him. And Clara Mitchell, graceful, steadfast, unbroken, proved that true beauty is not found in the face, but in the truth that outlives you. The evening sun spilled across the Mitchell estate, casting long shadows across the garden, where roses and lavender bloomed in careful rows. Clara Mitchell sat by the window of her study, her favorite leather-bound journal open before her. The courtroom battles were over. The foundation had been launched, and the world seemed to look at her, not just as a successful businesswoman, but as a symbol of integrity. And yet, as she pressed her pen to paper, Clara knew this was not the end of her journey. It was the moment to look back and reflect. Her handwriting flowed slowly, but each word carried the weight of a lifetime. I did not fight him because I craved revenge. I fought because no theft, no betrayal should erase a lifetime of truth. She paused, letting the ink dry as she gazed out at the fading light. The truth of those words echoed deep within her. She had not sought to destroy Andrew out of spite, though his betrayal had pierced her heart. She had fought because to remain silent would have been to betray her grandmother, her mother, every woman who had carried the family's secrets with pride. To let Andrew's theft stand would have meant erasing not just her own work, but the sacrifices of generations. For Clara, the trial had never been about formulas or financial gain. It had been about something far greater, the sanctity of legacy. Her mind wandered back to her younger self, mixing oils by hand in her kitchen, praying the rent would be covered, giving samples to neighbors in jam jars. None of that had been glamorous, but it had been real. Every wrinkle on her hands, every sleepless night, every careful note written in her grandmother's old book, those were the bricks of her empire. Andrew had thought he could steal the walls, but he had never understood the foundation. Clara leaned back in her chair, her voice rising softly in the empty room, as though speaking to herself. Beauty fades. It always does. The skin wrinkles, the hair turns silver, the face in the mirror becomes someone you hardly recognize. But that is not the end of beauty. It is the beginning of truth. Outward beauty is a gift of youth, but inner beauty, that belongs to those who endure. Her eyes drifted to the framed photograph of Sophia as a child, grinning with messy curls and flour on her cheeks from helping in the kitchen. She thought of her daughter now, older, wiser, bruised, but healing from the collapse of her marriage. Clara's heart swelled with both pride and sorrow. Greed consumes, she whispered. It ate Andrew alive. It blinded him until he believed lies could become truth if spoken with enough confidence. But greed always betrays its keeper. It devours trust, love, and dignity until nothing remains but emptiness. She thought of Andrew's downfall. The man who once strutted across stages adored and envied now vanished from headlines except as a cautionary tale. She did not hate him. Hatred was a burden too heavy to carry. But she pitied him. He had chosen ambition over integrity, vanity over truth, and in doing so, had lost everything that mattered. Clara picked up her pen once more and wrote, "Legacy is the only beauty that does not fade. A formula may be stolen, but wisdom cannot. A name may be slandered, but truth cannot. What we pass on to those who come after us, that is the true face of immortality." As the words filled the page, she felt the burden in her chest lighten. She had spent years believing her worth was tied to products, to sales, to the admiration of others. Now she understood her worth was in the torch. She carried the torch she would pass on. She closed her eyes and heard her mother's voice, gentle but firm. "True beauty is not in the face, but in the truth you leave behind." Clara smiled faintly. That wisdom, once buried like a seed, had blossomed fully in her own life. Outside, the evening deepened. The roses glowed faintly in the twilight, their petals soft, but resilient. Clara rose from her chair, pressing her hand against the cool glass of the window. "I will not be remembered for my youth," she murmured. "I will be remembered for my truth." The world would one day forget the scandal, the courtrooms, the headlines. But the women helped by the Buried Beauty Foundation would remember. The students given scholarships, the entrepreneurs mentored into success, the daughters taught never to confuse greed with ambition, they would carry forward the truth. And that Clara realized was enough. She returned to her journal and penned the final lines of her reflection. Beauty fades. Ambition burns. Greed consumes. But truth endures, and legacy, if built with love and patience, lasts longer than any face in a mirror. That is the beauty no one can steal. Clara closed the journal gently, her hand lingering on the cover. The shadows lengthened around her, but in her heart there was only light. The house was quiet, the kind of silence that comes not from emptiness, but from peace. Clara Mitchell sat at her writing desk, the leather-bound notebook of her grandmother, resting beside her worn and soft from decades of use. The faint smell of lavender oil still clung to its pages, a reminder of the countless hours she had spent mixing and testing formulas by hand. Tonight, however, she was not mixing creams or planning campaigns. Tonight, she was writing a letter. She dipped her pen into ink, the steady scratch of metal against paper, filling the stillness. Her words were not for herself, nor for the world outside, but for Sophia, and for the daughters and granddaughters who might one day read them. My dearest Sophia, and to the generations that come after you, our family has never been rich in money, but we have always been rich in truth. The formulas in this notebook were born not of greed, but of care. Care for the skin, care for the earth, care for the women who trusted us. They were written with patience, refined with sacrifice, and carried with pride. Remember this. Never let greed wear the mask of ambition. Protect what is yours, but share it with wisdom. Clara paused, her hand trembling slightly, as she thought of Andrew, his ambition, his arrogance, his downfall. She sighed, then continued. You will meet people who will try to take shortcuts. They will dress greed in fine clothes and call it vision. They will steal and call it innovation. Do not follow them. Do not envy them. Their empires may rise quickly, but they crumble just as fast. What endures is not what you take, but what you build with honesty. The words flowed heavy, but necessary. I fought for this legacy, not because I feared losing money, but because I feared losing the truth. If the world forgets who made these formulas, if they forget the sacrifices behind them, then they forget us. And I will not allow my mother, my grandmother, or myself to be erased by a lie. That is why I stood against betrayal. Not out of anger, but out of love. When she finished the last line of the letter, Clara folded it carefully and slipped it into the back pocket of the leather notebook. She tied the notebook shut with a ribbon, as her grandmother had once done, and placed it on the table. Later that evening, she called Sophia into the study. Her daughter entered quietly, her eyes soft, her face lined with both sorrow and resilience after the painful end of her marriage. Clara smiled gently, gesturing for her to sit. My darling, she began, her voice low but steady. This is yours now. She pushed the notebook towards Sophia. Sophia's breath caught. She reached out with trembling fingers, brushing against the worn cover. Mom, this is the original, your grandmother's. Clara nodded. And mine, and now yours. But with it comes responsibility, not just to protect the formulas, but to protect the values behind them. Never sell truth for convenience. Never trade honesty for ambition. Our name means nothing if it is not trusted. Tears welled in Sophia's eyes. I don't deserve this after what happened. After Andrew. Clara reached across the table, taking her daughter's hands. Do not blame yourself for another's betrayal. What matters is not that we were deceived, but that we survived with our dignity intact. This, she tapped the notebook, is not just paper and ink. It is our family's heart. Guard it, yes, but also use it to guide. Share it with wisdom so it may help others as it has helped us. Sophia held the notebook to her chest, as though it were a sacred relic. "I promise, Mom, I'll honor it. And I'll honor you." For Clara, it was enough. She had carried the burden of legacy all her life, first handed to her by her grandmother, then defended against betrayal. Now, at last, she could pass the torch, knowing it was in safe hands. That night, as Clara watched her daughter leave the study, the notebook clasped tightly against her heart, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She no longer feared the theft of her secrets, for they were no longer hers alone to guard. They belonged to Sophia and to the generations that would follow. And in that passing of torch, Clara found peace. The study was quiet, except for the faint rustle of pages as Clara closed the leather-bound notebook. Her fingers lingered on the cover, tracing the worn edges that carried the weight of 3 generations of women before her. Outside, the late afternoon sun slanted through the curtains, bathing her hands in a golden glow. These were hands that had once been young and smooth, later lined with age and sacrifice, yet always steady. They had mixed oils, written formulas held her daughter close, and fought for truth when lies threatened to erase it all. She leaned back in her chair, letting the light warm her skin, her breathing calm and even. For the first time in many years, she felt no burden pressing on her chest. The secrets she had guarded, the battles she had fought, the legacy she had preserved, it was no longer hers alone. It had been passed forward, entrusted to Sophia, and one day to Sophia's children. In that moment of stillness, Clara understood something profound. Victory had not been the courtroom ruling or the collapse of Andrew's empire. True victory was this knowing that her family's truth would endure, carried by hands that respected it. She had not fought because she hated him, no. She had fought because love demanded protection, because a lifetime of truth could not be erased by greed. Her eyes closed, and a faint smile curved her lips. She whispered softly, as though to the generations who might one day read her words. "If it were you, would you forgive a betrayal of family? Or would you fight for the truth of your legacy?" The light shifted softer, now spilling across her face. Clara remained still, her heart at peace, her spirit unbroken. She had lived not for vengeance, but for endurance. And in the end, that endurance became the most beautiful legacy of all. Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to follow Family Revenge Stories for more unforgettable tales of betrayal, justice, in the triumph of truth.